Good evening, everybody. This is the Columbus Free Press, March 9th, 2024. Welcome. Tomorrow is going to be Ramadan. We're in the middle of major conflict in the Middle East. There we go. Hello, Columbus Free Press, March 9th. Just going to repeat so that we can get right. 2024 and March 9th. The world is under attack. It's on fire. A lot of people are saying things. There's going to be campaigning going on. It's going to be a very vibrant world. As journalists, as a media, Columbus Free Press, we want to covering the reality of what the globe is going into. So one point of contention for sure to the heart of a lot of folks is the Middle East conflict, or in particular Israel's military action on Gaza, and the people of Gaza have had a lot of attack. Israel population also has concerns, and then it gets into all the other ethno-religio discussions that we can get into deeper than that. But we're talking today with, and Pete Johnson, our president, is going to do introduction and some initial questions in this discussion. And we'd like it to be progressive. We're a progressive organization and would like to have a progressive discussion on where we're at. We're journalists, as I was saying. We're wanting to get to truth, speaking truth to power, correct? We're all about that. Historically, I'm going to share just a few shots to get our juices flowing a little bit. I'm going to hope to share my screen and get this up. But I know I'm supposed to go full screen here, and so let's do this. Never mind. I'm going to just pop through some pictures. Enter full screen. Okay. So historically, there's been issues and struggle since, at least 1948. But we're now in a height of discussion with one particular action going on, Israel and Gaza. And so Pete Johnson, our president, wanted to have discussion with a well-authored person, has had articles at the Free Press, in the Free Press, for many years. He's the current editor of the Palestine Chronicle. And Pete, I'm going to let you go ahead and move forward. Is Razi Barut on now? I don't see him located, but
yeah, he just popped in. I just let him in. He's joining now.
I see it. Yeah, thanks. Perfect. Okay, so Pete, why don't you go ahead? And again, thanks everybody. And Zarka, we're going to definitely invite your conversation as well, since you're moving forward and trying to get elected on some stuff as well. And on the west side of town, if you're living on the west side of town, you can vote for somebody that's going to be down with the issue. But so go ahead, Pete. Why don't you start with the introductions, so Ramsey can get on to what he needs to get to, and discussion on his collection of voices on liberation. And I thought that was sort of a great article or a title for a good discussion. And so he had written recently a book, Voices of Liberation. So go ahead, Pete, and we'll talk a little bit more. Okay, thanks. And I'm going to eat. Has to
Pete, we
unmute.
can't hear you.
You're going to have to unmute. And he is coming in from Bangkok, so forgive us.
How's that?
There you go. Good.
Am I unmuted now? All right.
You got low bandwidth. You might have to shut your video off.
Say what, Steve?
You have low bandwidth. You might have to shut your video off for the audio to be heard better.
Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that.
I can do
Make
it
sure
from
I'm
here.
speaking up here. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we could try it like this.
So,
if you want, but
thanks, Ramsey, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. For everybody that doesn't know, we've been printing articles from Ramsey for at least 10 years. I'm not even sure when we started or how that got initiated. As Mark said, he is the editor of the Middle East Eye, former deputy managing editor of Al Jazeera Online, written several books. He's and been interviewed all over the place. I've just listened yesterday to a recent interview with Scott Horton at Anti-War Radio. So with that, I will allow Mr. Barode to speak a little bit about himself, and then we've got a few questions to facilitate the conversation. How's that?
Absolutely, Peter. Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone else who's joining us right now. I will not speak for long about myself, aside from just kind of mentioning the main theme of my writings and my research. My focus is in an area called people's history or history from below. I focus largely on trying to retell and reorient Palestinian history in particular, but the histories of whatever subject that I deal with in general, around the idea that history is ultimately made by people, not by politicians, not by factions, not by individuals. I've done my PhD in the subject at the University of Exeter. And I spent time at the University of California, Santa Barbara after my PhD. And now I am at the Zaim University in Istanbul, dealing largely with similar themes. I've authored 7 books. And my latest book, Our Vision for Liberation, it was co-edited with Israeli professor Ilan Pape, also at the University of Exeter. And I'm very happy to be with you. And if I'm happy to answer any question or let you lead the conversation anywhere you want.
All right. Well, the first question I had for you today was a couple weeks ago when I first asked you if you could join us here. You said you were trying to get entry into Gaza, and I'm sure that you did not gain entry, but can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So I have a family in Gaza. Actually, my family is originally from Gaza. We were refugees from historic Palestine, today's Israel, in 1948. And we mostly settled in the Gaza Strip. We live in various refugee camps, towns and cities, including Khan Yunis, Gaza City, and the central area in the Gaza Strip. Since the start of the war, we've lost many members. Until recently, I was counting up to 40 members, close and distant relatives, until I spoke to a relative of mine who told me actually the number is 250, if not more. I still have a sister there that I was hoping to get out of the strip. She is older and she doesn't feel very well. Her husband was murdered just a few days ago. He was the head of the law department at Azhar University in Gaza City, one of the most respected lawyers in Gaza. In fact, his contribution to Islamic finance in particular is considered to be one of the kind of top-notch research throughout the Middle East. He was not able to run away. He has some problems in his nervous system, so he can only walk with very small steps. As he was running away or attempting to, an Israeli quadcopters, as they call them, shot him in the head. He bled to death. And we are still trying to find his body. So my focus earlier from 2 weeks ago of trying to get to Gaza and see what I can do to help is now oriented towards trying to get my sister and her surviving kids out of Gaza as soon as humanly possible. But some of them want to stay to find their father's body. Others want to leave and so forth and so on. So this is the kind of dilemmas that we are dealing with. And unfortunately, nobody has gained entry to Gaza since then.
So on behalf of everybody listening here, I can't even imagine the horror of that. And I remember asking you about, how it affected you personally back about a month after October 7th, and you said 26 members of your family was killed already. And it's just overwhelming and unbelievable, and very sorry for your loss and all that. So what is the process to try to get into Gaza? And did you ever have any real opportunity at that, or is that just impossible?
Well, I have a Palestinian passport or travel document, which technically, in theory, allows me to go to Gaza, but under relatively normal circumstances. Others cannot, unless they are working with international organizations with particular weight, political weight, that is. But now even organizations affiliated with the United Nations, like UNRWA and others, are unable to gain access, are unable to leave Gaza. So, which means that just a lowly figure like myself would not succeed in entering Gaza. Out of desperation, I thought about actually just going to Egypt and getting as close to the Gaza border as possible, so that the moment the border opens, I can immediately cross. But that did not work out very well either. Now which is, I mean, that tells you a great deal that the Egyptians are charging $7,500 for every Palestinian who wants to escape the Gaza. So you have to pay 7,500. The number goes sometimes up to 10 and 11 and $15,000. So those Palestinians with some money could potentially survive. The vast majority cannot. We don't really know exactly what happens to the money. It goes to some Egyptian generals at the border. They are working with Israelis. So basically, it's you have to make a choice between taking your chances of living or dying in Gaza, and between losing potentially everything and leaving. And even then, only very few people are actually able to manage that. Sadly, even though we rejected this idea from the very beginning, now we are leaning towards coming up with the money, especially after my brother-in-law has been killed. So now we are trying to raise that money among the brothers of us who are living outside Palestine. But that's a whole different process. I'm saying this not because I'm dwelling on personal issues, but this is really the argument that every Palestinian in the Gaza Strip, all 2.3 millions of them, are having to deal with at the moment. And if you do have money or have a property, you can't really sell it. And if you sell it, you cannot register it, because all the ministries in Gaza City that would allow you to register properties or birth certificates or anything have been destroyed. and most of their employees have been killed, including ministers and such. So it's an incredible trap. I can't even emphasize. I can't emphasize, or I cannot really convey it in a proper way, because everything that I have learned about the history of Palestine did not really prepare me or anyone else for this. We need a new language to even try to grasp, let alone explain what is happening to the rest of the world. It's like dealing with weapons in which it's not really like the kind of weapons that are not weapons of mass destruction, but they are traditional weapons that are able to achieve exactly that, mass destruction. That's what's underway in Gaza.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what can you say about the conditions in Gaza? I mean, all of us know how terrible it is to some extent. But being a little closer to it, is there any way to even describe?
Right. So in the early phases of the war, I mean, let's remember that Gaza was poor to start with. Poverty rate in Gaza was the highest in Palestine, and one of the highest in the world. Unemployment rate was about 50%. So that kind of, or 48 and fraction percent. So that kind of should give an idea of what that situation was prior. Gaza has been under a hermetic siege for about 17 years prior to the war. So they were not really prepared. It's not the kind of situation where you can store massive amounts of food and kind of wait in some basement somewhere for the war to end. They had very little to begin with. So what happened since the war, they went through everything that they owned. They used whatever money, whatever gold to sell, to buy food, flour. Then they ran out of flour. Then they started resorting to other means to survive. Then ultimately they start crushing the animal feed and turning it into bread. Tasted it before simply because I lived in Gaza until my 20s, and we've been through difficult times too. And it's really quite a very bitter taste and quite disgusting, makes you throw up actually. But somehow they managed. But once the rotten food ran away, once the potatoes ran away, when the food with greater, shelf life ran away, they started resorting to eating cats and dogs. Many areas, especially in the north, are now out of homeless cats and dogs because they have been eaten. And that's where the famine started. Started in the north first, and acute hunger began in the south. The south is slightly better off in terms of the famine because some shipments are allowed, but in the north, nothing is allowed whatsoever. So people kind of get the news that perhaps some UN trucks are going to be reaching a certain part in the strip, and then they would kind of rush there, and they wait sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. About a week or so ago, there was an area called the Nabulsi roundabout in northern Gaza, where people were waiting for trucks, and trucks were in fact allowed because the Israeli army did allow the trucks to enter. And when hundreds of people rushed to the trucks to get the aids, they were shot at, and nearly 1,000 people, actually more than 1,000 people, were killed, about 116 killed, and the rest were wounded. So salvation doesn't come often to the north, and when it does, it could lead to horrific massacres like that one. So unable to push the Israelis to open the borders, the Americans, along with the Jordanians and the French and a couple of other countries, have been dropping food on Gaza. Much of the food, however, in these large boxes fell into the sea. Others fell inside Israel in an area we call the Gaza envelope. And some food, as of 2 days ago, fell on top, or rather yesterday, on top of a family home, killed 5 people and killed 5 people, including 2 children. So now they are realizing the idea of dropping food from the air is not going to work out. Now they are talking about a port, a floating port that connects Gaza to the outside world, but that's going to be established by the U.S. Army. Of course, it's a highly suspicious idea, simply because the Americans can easily ask Israel politely, but they can easily impose on Israel the allowance of aid to northern Gaza. It's not a struggle for them to do so. So why are they opting for the idea of the floating port? Is a whole different subject of discussion, and as I said, it's highly suspicious because I worry that it's an attempt at making it impossible for Gazans to coordinate with the Egyptians. They want to keep Egypt out of the conversation altogether so that the fate of Gaza remains entirely in the hands of Washington and Tel Aviv. The other worry that we have about this is that they said that they want to have floating hospitals and the like, an old Israeli idea that they floated years ago at the cost of about $37 million. But if they are talking about floating hospitals, it means that they are talking about a continued war. And also the possibility that they could open the way for desperate Palestinians to actually leave Gaza altogether and to migrate to Europe, which is the nightmare scenario for the Palestinians, as we fear that this could ultimately lead to the kind of ethnic cleansing that will end the Palestinian cause altogether.
I understand. So to, I guess, circle back to maybe the beginning, I was listening to your interview with Scott Horton, and you alluded to the Palestinian collective memory and the attacks on Gaza in 2014, 2017, etc. Can you just kind of talk about the collective Palestinian memory on everything that happened before October 7th?
Right. So I've always argued that the center of Palestinian history is not the big cities of the West Bank or even Jerusalem itself, but rather the center of Palestinian history. And I'm not talking about Palestinian culture, I'm not talking about Palestinian political discourse. I'm talking about history of resistance has always been the Gaza Strip, which kind of creates some kind of a dichotomy because Gaza is a very small piece of land. It's about 181 square kilometers. That's approximately 363 to 365 square, rather 181 square miles, 365 square kilometers. Very, very small and very populated. We're looking here now at 2.3 million people, about 4 or 5% of that population have already been killed or wounded in the last 5 months. Now, Gaza has served an important role in Palestinian history, that being the center of Palestinian resistance. Since the very, very beginning, Gaza resisted. I'm talking about 1948, when Israel was established on the ruins of Palestine. There was a movement called the Fidaiyin, meaning the freedom fighting movement. They were peasants, poor peasants who lost their land in Palestine. And their ultimate aim from the very beginning was to go back and to salvage the crops that they lost, that they left their homes in their homes in southern Palestine. That movement, the Fidaiyin movement, morphed into something bigger and bigger throughout the years, and eventually became the factions that you see today. So these are third generation, not even fourth generation, descendants of the peasants who have been pushed out of Palestine over 75 years ago. The story that of Gaza that's usually being told through mainstream media, through Israel, and sometimes even sympathetic media that doesn't fully appreciate the complexity of that history, assumes that the story of Gaza started with the siege, with the elections of Hamas to power when I say power, I mean air quote power, not as in real power, because you can't possibly have power under military occupation. But they were elected to a nominal representation in a Palestinian parliament, and that kind of did not make Israel happy. They felt like this could be also the US was not very happy about it because they were worried about the rise of um, movements like Hamas in other Middle Eastern countries, and they don't want to see that happening. So they did everything in their power to crush the outcome of that democratic elections. That resulted in a siege that lasted for 17 years. Throughout those years, the nature of the conversation shifted. It shifted into those who are saying, yes, keep the siege because these are terrorists and need to be totalized, and those who are saying, lift the siege, people are dying. Within that kind of opposing viewpoints about the siege and the true human cost of it, and it's been quite high, we missed kind of a very important part of the story, that Gaza, number one, is an outcome of historical processes that date back to 1948, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine by Israel. Number two, there is a very clear connection between what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank, and by extension, what's happening in East Jerusalem. That Gaza is not a marginal or a separate entity. Number three, the resistance in Gaza is part and parcel of the larger stream of resistance throughout Palestine. What maintained that resistance, and that's where we go back to your question, Pete, what maintained that resistance is the collective memory. I grew up in the Gaza Strip, in a refugee camp. I come from a village that was destroyed by Israel in 1948. My understanding of Palestine and the rights of the Palestinian and the struggle for Palestinian freedom is only and is entirely an outcome of that collective memory. It didn't pass on to us through school because we were not allowed to teach our own history in school. It passed through down to us through these stories and the memories and the steadfastness taught to us by our grandparents and our parents, and we are passing this on to our kids and grandkids as well. And I think that has really been the real channel of resistance. Now, why is that important? Why is this even functional to this conversation? It really is not sentimental. Every single time, every single conflict, Israel makes the claim, and the US usually nods in support, that the problem is terrorism, that the problem is the radicals, the problem is Hamas. But the problem has been there before Hamas. Hamas was established in 1987. Prior to that, it wasn't Hamas. It was the socialists, actually the communists. And prior to the communists, there were others. And prior to those others, we keep going back until we reach the peasants, who had no ideology whatsoever. They were not followers of Marx, and they were not followers of Yasser Arafat, and they were not followers of any of the kind of ideologies that exist today. Resistance in Palestine has always been a natural reaction to a great injustice that has befallen the Palestinian people. And this is why we need to insist on reorienting the Palestinian discourse, because if we keep failing at that, we keep getting engaged in conversations about Hamas and Fatah and Israel and what happened on October 7 and what didn't happen on October 7. And everything else that happened prior to that, and I'm talking about 75 years of history, is completely marginalized. And if you bring up that history, somehow you are a radical and you are unreasonable and you should not be part of any polite conversation on what's happening in Gaza. That's people like me, historians like me from Gaza and elsewhere, that we are constantly trying to reorient the story of Palestine back to its original base. And this is not because we are dreamers, but because this is what the Gazans themselves are saying. The references and the political discourse that emerges from Gaza as we speak, whether kids in the street or the spokesmen for the various movements, to people in these displacement camps all over Gaza, they are making references to Jerusalem, to the Nakba, the catastrophe of 1948, to the ethnic cleansing, to the occupation, to the apartheid, to all of that. They are not living in total isolation from that reality. I hope that addresses your point somewhat, Pete.
Yes, it does. Like to take a moment here to encourage anybody that's got any questions to raise their hand. Mark, is there anybody currently? Looks like Bill Lyons might have a question.
Yeah, should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to ask about that the media never covers and talks about the last 17 years of the siege or the embargo, or the whatever you want to call it there. And I've heard stories from people, and I've been listening to various people, Norman Finkelstein and others, about how so many things that we would take for granted as Americans aren't even allowed. Simple things like maybe chocolate or spaghetti or things like that. And then he says that the people have been kept and it's carefully calculated on like a starvation plus diet. And so many things that we would think, why would they prevent these simple things from happening? I mean, getting into Gaza. It just seems so unimaginable and brutal, and so I'd like to know from your knowledge and experience what that entails and all, because the media never covers any of that here.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, Norman is absolutely spot on in his assessment, and I'm a good friend of Norman. We go back many years, and he has always been kind of like reiterating many of these very important topics. Unfortunately, the mainstream media doesn't want to look at them, because looking at them is having to face a whole new reality than the one that they convey. I mean, chocolates and pasta aside, how about the cancer medication? How about people reaching their universities? How people families reuniting in the last 17 years of siege, in fact, even prior to that siege, looking at the last 25 years, I was allowed to reach Gaza once. And even then, it was quite miraculous process that got me to reach Gaza. It's an extremely arduous process. People, and once you leave Gaza, the chances of you going back is very, very difficult, because you don't know if you will ever be allowed to leave again. Um, and the idea about the calculating the calories, it's actually not it's not a claim, or it's not just a notion calculated based on evidence on the grounds. No, actually, Israeli media, Haaretz in particular, revealed leaked documents, Bill, that showed that indeed they are calculating the calories that the Palestinians in Gaza are allowed to have. Now, this is really interesting because it links up to another issue. A few years earlier, I think 2005, before that revelation came out about calorie calculations came out, there was a close friend and confidant of Ariel Sharon who argued that the siege on Gaza is kind of a carrot and a stick situation. Treat people in the West Bank slightly better, humiliate those in Gaza so that they would reach the conclusion that there's no peace process, there's no Palestinian state, there's no political aspirations. And he said, our aim is not to kill Palestinians, which quite kind of him. He said, we just want to put them on a diet. What he meant by that is kind of push them to the brink, but not quite kill them as of yet. And he said that with a chuckle. And then later on, we learned from Haaretz that he wasn't actually a ridiculous man speaking gibberish. He was actually talking from real experience. The military was counting calories. Men require this much calories to stay alive, women, children, and so forth. And they would keep track of the population so that they can adjust the calories based on the calculation, the population growth. But also, Gaza was functional to Israel in other ways. When the siege was imposed on Gaza, Israel wasn't anywhere in the top 10 exporters of weapons. The world's top exporters of weapons. But you notice that after every war, and I've been following the numbers very closely, after every war, 2008, 9, no, 2006, 2008, 9, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2019, 2021, and now, every single time you are going to find a situation in which Israel kind of pushes up in the rank of the world's top weapon exporters. Where are these weapons being kind of used? They call them field proven or combat proven in Gaza. So Gaza was used as Israel's top platform for experimenting with weapons and security and killing technology of all kind. And sadly, many people around the world have been kind of buying into that. And even more sadly, that some of the Arab countries that have normalized with Israel, such as the United Arab Emirates, have actually hosted Israeli weapon merchants or sellers to show them kind of in these large weapon expos in Dubai how these weapons are able to achieve their jobs and get get the job done. So the siege was totally functional from a financial perspective. Israel is able to make billions of dollars, and Gaza is this defenseless, hapless place. Yeah, you have the occasional rocket now and then, but aside from that, it really did not make a major impact. October 7 was an interesting thing because there is one thing that, for Israel to maintain a degree of insecurity in Gaza so that Gazans would fire back once in a while, so Israel would go to major war and kill thousands. But what happened in October 7 was humiliating. I don't want to talk about the morality or immorality. We can discuss that if you want to or not. But what really matters here is that Israel is a country that has been, going everywhere in Africa, from Kenya to Uganda to even South Africa, and of course Arab countries and Muslim countries, Chad, Sudan, the United Arab Emirates, and other parts of the world, and China and others, saying, kind of flouting their credentials as this powerful and defeatable army that is in control. We have the best security apparatus anywhere in the world. And then you had the images of October 7. As far as the Israeli brand is concerned, it was just tarnished completely. It turned out imagine if the powerful Arnold Schwarzenegger in the height of his career in the 70s was beaten up by a child in the street. It's just humiliating. And that's what happened. And I think a lot of what's happening in Gaza right now serve a psychological purpose for Israel. One thing, which is to kind of redeem some of the credibility, otherwise the entire, weapons market in Israel is going to be destroyed. I mean, the Merkava tanks. I mean, you go to YouTube prior to the war, you have all these commercials or all these documentaries about the most powerful tank in the world, that anything in the world. And these are kids who made their own so-called Yasin 105 in underground tunnels that are blowing up Merkava tanks. Is humiliating, is embarrassing for Israel. So they want to do everything in their power to maintain an element of that prestige, of that power. I personally don't think it's going to work. It's not the kind of thing that you reverse just by killing a lot of people. But Netanyahu, and that's the main issue here, even though many people in his army are saying, enough, we are at a breaking point. And if it were not for the 100 shipments of American weapons to Israel, Israel would have run out of every single bullet. You've got to stop. You are, kind of teetering around a very dangerous zone. But he wouldn't. So I don't really know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, every political analysis we came up with that there's a certain point where the Americans are going to say enough is enough. There's a certain point where Europe is going to turn against Netanyahu. But we keep reaching all these kind of imaginary thresholds, and yet he keeps going and going and going. And so that's where we are at the moment. The hope is that this is going to stop so we can just find the bodies of our loved ones, give them proper burial, bring some manufactured or kind of temporary housings into Gaza, and more importantly than anything, stave off an attempt at ethnically cleansing Palestinians. Because without Palestinians, there's no Palestinian struggle, there's no Palestinian rights or restorations.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to bring in Pharrell and Connie and Sandy and Zerka into this a little bit more to increase the voices that we're hearing tonight. Pete, you had a lot of your questions. Have you had a chance to ask all that which you had? Because you wanted to make sure you got those out first.
I have a few more, but if other people have questions, let's go with that.
I think we should involve, voices of liberation. That's what the book is. We have voices here as well. So I'd like us to sort of. So Stephen, make sure Zerka has access to speak, please, and then Connie or Pharrell, if you guys are ready, because your long-standing work on this, has kept that message, that mission out in front of us for sure locally. But Zach, go ahead, please. Zach Abdid is a local activist that's finally decided to jump across and try to get elected, so she's been doing a lot of work before that on the west side of Columbus, and is very much been very vocal on ceasefire as well, and has been leader on that voice. So please share your perspectives and voice, please.
Good evening, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Ramzi, I am just speechless to hear what you have shared and the way you have shared it. It has, like, you have kept it like a normal business when we know that it is not a normal business. And that's something that tells the story of your struggle, not for 6 months, but a lifetime. I'm 55-year-old and I'm from Pakistan, and I am raised hearing this all my life and have been protesting for Palestine since I think I remember, with my parents on the street of Karachi, and then here in North Carolina where I lived for several years, and then here in Columbus in last 16 years, so many times. So Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun. I please accept my condolences for your family members, for the recent loss that you are dealing with the horrible living situation that our brothers and sisters in Palestine are dealing with. And what is so disturbing at so many levels, something that I never felt when I was in Pakistan, because Pakistan, I was just a Pakistani citizen who would protest and would feel helpless and everything. But here I am in America for almost 30 years now. And what really is so disturbing is that this is happening on our watch, now that it is happening on my taxpayer dollars that we have earned. We all work very hard. And I can tell you on behalf of American people that American people are loving, they care, they support. In general, we would not let a little bird die. And then when it comes to something like this and we are watching this, it's very disturbing. But I also want to tell you that this group of people that you have here in the audience right now, these are some of the movers and shakers. I have known some of them for my time here in Columbus for almost 20 years. And you are in very good company, and we will do everything that we could do to alleviate whatever is there. I see Farrell is raising hand. Farrell, please go ahead, my friend.
Thank you, Zarka first, and yeah, Pharrell, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, that I also am very, very sorry for what happened to your family and to all the families in Gaza and the West Bank in this genocide and occupation of this apartheid state. I'm a Jewish member of Jewish Voice for Peace. We're working as hard as we can. Probably everyone here tonight is part of the choir. You are preaching to the choir. So really, all I want to say is that I want to thank you. I think you are a hero in my estimation for speaking out the way you speak out. And we will continue to do whatever we can to keep this fight up. Our government is really, I'm sorry to say, in this language, but in my opinion, they're scum. In other words, they're not worth even, thinking about as really human beings. They're just selfish politicians who think of themselves primarily and have no real interest in what's happening to the rest of the people in the world. So thank you, Ramzi, really.
Connie?
We have, hopefully, some of the listeners actually have questions for Ramsey as well. Go ahead.
And later when we are done with questions, I would like to reflect on why I'm running and why I'm unapologetically pro ceasefire without any fear of what happens to my race.
Okay. Zerkin, Faye, you wanted to ask a question? Faye, are you ready?
I have a lot of questions, and I do apologize that I missed the first half of the interview, but I do have a lot of questions regarding the reason. Well, my first question is, why does Hamas, the government of Gaza, which is Hamas and was elected by the people of Gaza, why do they not want a reasonable ceasefire? Why did they come to Israel? Why did they come to Israel on? I'm sorry, someone else is speaking and I'm trying to speak. Please stop. Please mute yourself because it's my turn to speak. Can someone please mute themselves? Okay, thank you.
I don't hear anyone.
So my question is, what is the reason that they will not accept Israel as a state? What is the reason that they attacked Israel so brutally on October 7th? What is the reason that the international women's groups do not acknowledge and do not care about the women and men who were raped, murdered, children raped and murdered? Why is it that the international community doesn't care about that? I have so many questions, and one question I'd like to answer, I'd like asked, and
Can we allow him to answer the
Sorry,
question?
we lost your audio. I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I would just
Can you hear me?
request that we give him a chance to answer the question.
Well, I have several questions and I want them all, but go ahead. Go ahead and answer the questions I proposed. I've asked just now, and then I have some further questions, please. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much for those questions. Please remember, we are media, and you please write down, put in written form these questions, because it's very important to get things that are in people's minds down onto paper and to really make it sort of a constructed way of how do we approach discussion and dialogue. And so, but your questions are very valid, and I encourage folks to share in those. But again, we're not here to address all the answers, right? All the answers would have been addressed long time ago if we could have. But Sandy, go ahead. You're another local voice that we've sort of tried to get you to help survive and organize Veterans for Peace, and hopefully that's coming along well too. So thanks again.
It is, but I didn't have anything prepared for that, but I certainly will next time. But I do have a question. Unlike Michigan, we do not have a way, as I understand it, to put uncommitted in the voting booths. As I read through it, it said if they will not calculate any votes that are, or any comments in when we vote, unless it's for a party that's officially registered, which I understood to mean that if we vote, if we all say uncommitted on our ballots, it's not going to mean a darn thing. No one can, I don't know if anybody knows anything about that, or what another way that we can we can show the same kind of response as had in opposition to genocide as what they've done in other states.
Ohio makes
Does
it
that
a little
answer?
harder to do that kind of format, that formal, but you can always leave the top
Can I just,
empty.
can I just?
But Faye had some questions.
We never gave him a chance to answer the question.
Here's some questions. So yeah, I'd like Ramsey to sort of get into that, and then Zerka has her hand up. But yeah, we have a very variety of approaches for peace in the Middle East, evidently tonight. So thank you, Ramsey, for your voices here.
Of course. And I think Zarka might have the answer to Sandy's question because it's more like a technical issue. And I will cede the space for you, Zarka, here in a minute. Just want to thank all the people who spoke and all the sentiments and the support. The questions that were asked by I can't remember the lady's name. That tirade of questions. It's too bad that she did not hear my presentation, because if she did, at least she would have heard me addressing various points raised here. And whether she would agree with it or not, that's a whole different subject. But I don't feel like it's fair for me to repeat everything. But I do want to talk about the positionality of where we speak from. I speak from the viewpoint of a Palestinian refugee whose family is being decimated in Gaza as we speak. I don't think, even if we assume that everything that has been said, and a lot of it has been proven to be untrue. In fact, there's a story that came out in Haaretz today, the Israeli newspaper, that actually says that, let's see, Israeli army, not Hamas, killed civilians in kibbutz Be'eri, according to Haaretz and other Israeli media. So more and every single day, new information appear. And I'm not talking about Palestinian media, I'm not talking about Hamas media, I'm talking about Israeli media that suggests that indeed that a lot of what has happened, whether at the Nova Festival or at the various settlements, were actually killed, people were killed by Apache helicopters. I think she should consult some of that information. Regarding the issues of beheading of babies, that has been kind of a laughable joke and a dark joke nonetheless, but none of it has been proven to be true and has been abandoned very early on in the process, to the point that President Biden himself has abandoned that particular lie. Then later on, the issue of mass rape. There's actually a documentary that we produced, and I do encourage you to watch it. It's on YouTube, called The Black Dress, kind of responding to the supposed revelations by the New York Times that mass rape was indeed has taken place. It turned out that one of the co-authors of that, shocking article in the New York Times was someone who is affiliated with far-right extremists in the West Bank, and that has been by the admission of the New York Times itself, which apologized for it, and of course Jewish media like Mondois and Haaretz as well. I'm not trying to defend anybody. I'm just, as a media person, I am telling you what has been said by the media regarding many of these issues. Why did this happen in the first place? Now, I really hate to be placed in the position of someone who would quickly be designated as defending Hamas or supporting this or supporting that, because this is, unfortunately, has been my position throughout the years, and that of many other Palestinian journalists. If you're an American and Israeli even, you can speak as an independent journalist, a scholar and such. As a Palestinian, if you take a position that seems to be inconsistent with that of mainstream, you're immediately classified as terrorist sympathizer, the Hamas defender, even Hamas yourself. So we are always very, very careful in how we speak. But in truth is, and again, I said that earlier, is that Palestinian resistance whether you agree with the style of resistance or not, did not start with Hamas. It actually started with various ideologies and secular groups and socialist groups throughout the years. The resistance has been a direct result of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine by Israel, by the Israeli occupation of Palestine in 1967, by the Israeli siege on Gaza in 2005, by every war, every attack, every raid, every massacre. They always go hand in hand. If you want to ignore all of this and pretend that Palestinians are just free willed people living a normal life like everybody else, and they just chose to be bad, chose to be terrorists, chose to be blood thirsty, gangs and doing all of these things, and completely ignore the reality in which Palestinians have been placed in for all of these years. And then there's very little convincing I can do or say. All I ask you to do is to consider that people's actions quite often is a direct response or a reaction to something of much greater evil. If you want Palestinians to stop resisting, and I'm sure that they would be happy to do so, you need to end the Israeli occupation. You need to dismantle apartheid. You need to treat people like equal. You need to elevate people. You need to make people feel that they belong to a place instead of feeling that they are being constantly on the run, assassinated, killed, imprisoned, denied every basic human rights that's available to everybody else.
So Pete had some more questions. I'd like Pete to sort of bring back some other question that he had on some other issues along. And yes, I hear you, Zerka. We're going to bring you back in as well. We are sort of a timed conversation. I don't know how long Ramsey has, but we usually try to get done. Supposed to be 7 to 8, but it never is that. I don't know what time it is right now. Yeah, it's about 8 now. So we'll probably go about another 15, 20 minutes with discussion. Agreed, there's some volatility when in people's perspectives and of historical events. But go ahead, Pete, please.
That's what I really want to ask this question. It seems to me that Israel is just really, really good at propaganda. The beheaded baby story and the false rape stories that came out at the beginning. And then specifically, I think the last one that was just a propaganda coup was as soon as the International Court of Justice did what they did, they had ready to go the next day that, 8 people that delivered aid were members of Hamas, and basically took that story right off the front pages. So you want to just kind of talk about how Israeli propaganda?
Absolutely. I'd like to address why propaganda is important. I mean, this appears outlandish to many of us, silly even. What is this nonsense? What are they talking? They're talking about they raped women. No, they killed women, then they raped them after they were killed. Now, for those of us, I mean, these Hamas guys, and as per the Israeli hostages that were released, there was a particularly important interview of an Israeli woman and her daughter talking about how the respect that these guys have for women and how they would be do arm wrestling with the hostages, during their captivity, and one of the fighters brought a towel and put it between his hand and the hand of the woman, because he said, women are sacred. We don't touch women because they are sacred. That's her words, not mine. If she is delusional, suffering from sort of mental disease resulting from her captivity, that's her problem. But that's what she said, and that was in Israeli media. And then suddenly they are raping dead Israeli women. And it's like, why are they saying these things? And I'll tell you why. Think of it this way. There are two journalists, one Israeli, one Palestinian. That Palestinian journalist is me. That Palestinian journalist, even though he is quite well known amongst his people, has never been allowed access to the New York Times once in his life. Right? He's not quoted, he's not interviewed, he's not part of the conversation. The Israeli journalist can say or do whatever he wants, and it appears on the New York Times every other day, gets paid a lot of money, and his claims, no matter how unsubstantiated, are the claims. That Israeli journalist writes about raping of dead women, writes about decapitated babies, talks about just gunning down of people and all of this, and even when it's published in the New York Times and later proven to be untrue or corrected somehow, the immediate impact is already done. The vast majority of people in the world get that impression from what the Israelis are saying. Then Ramzi Baroud comes over here and he sends an article to your respected journal and others, writes in the Palestine Chronicle and few other alternative media, and says this is untrue. It's already been proven to be untrue by Israeli media. Even Haaretz, Yudaot Ahronot, Israel's Channel 12 have already proven this to be untrue, but it's too late. What registers is the initial lie that was made. This is why I'm saying Israeli propaganda is functional. Majority of people get the news, not the correction to the news. Nobody cares about the correction. Maybe 1% of the people get that updated version. So this is why Israel says all of these outrageous things so quickly, and even though you and I and many others are going to struggle to reverse them, it doesn't matter. Until today, we are being told that Saddam Hussein is the one responsible for 9/11. Go figure. Nobody, no academic in the world thinks that anymore. But in the public psyche, that association is still there. A lot of people still think that the Arabs tried to throw the Jews into the sea. That comes from 1967 war. It has no basis in reality. It doesn't matter. So that's how propaganda works. You create, no matter how outrageous of a propaganda, if the likes of me are completely marginalized from the conversation, if you are kept out of the conversation, if any sensible voice, Norman Finkelstein or Ilan Pape or anybody else, is kept out of that conversation, then the propaganda would register as the truth. So, as ridiculous as the Israeli claims are, sadly, they have served a very good purpose in the Israeli propaganda war against the Palestinians. And all these days, we are still struggling trying to untangle or detangle all of this mess and prove that none of these things have happened. But then you still have a respected CNN analyst or even a president who would go out and talk about decapitated babies and raped women.
Well, Zerka had her hand up earlier, and Pete, I know you wanted to continue some conversation, but let's see where we're at with that. We do want to remember and remind ourselves, this is March 9th, 2024, Columbus Free Press, Salon, focusing on voices of liberation. So, many different voices will bring liberation, right? It doesn't happen from one or the other. It needs to bring a lot of different people together to make liberation happen. So go ahead, Zerka, and please, at this time, maybe even take a pause here a little bit and do a little bit of why you want to run in the CD15 of Ohio. And that's a major undertaking, and I know you're doing it in the name of the people, the West Side as well. West, for sure. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much again. I appreciate it.
And then, excuse me, and then Pete will get back to your stuff. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. So again, I am running for U.S. Congress from Congressional District 15, as Mark mentioned. And this is Hilliard, Dublin, Galloway, West Side, Groveport to Sydney, Troy, and some part of Fairborn, Piqua, all of that area is in this district. This is very interesting that I have been serving the district overall from 16 years. And in my work before pandemic, I actually have served Fairborn and Dayton and other areas also. So the work that I have done as a nonprofit leader or a small business owner, addressing food insecurity to drugs, gangs, violence, all of that has benefited a larger area from Hilliard, Dublin, Hilltop, Grove City now that where I live, and very involved in school system and what's going on here, to all the way to Fairborn and Hoover Heights area where I have people who have received my services. The impact of my work so far is about $38 million, which includes from food insecurity to workforce development to many other areas that I have done. And all of this work is as a volunteer. The reason I'm running in election this year for congressional seat is that I have done everything that I could have done as a nonprofit leader or a small business owner to advocate for this district and the work that needs to be done. And it's really now getting to the point where we are lacking in funding. We are lacking in investment in our people. And on the other side, on foreign policy, we are seeing that billions of dollars are being sent constantly in military aid to places to destroy other countries and other places, while our own children here are hungry. I am really, really shocked, very disturbed to hear that while we know that human trafficking is so big that 40% of Columbus sex trafficking happens on Sullivan Avenue, where I started my organization to address this issue of minor girls being trafficked from here to Minnesota and Tennessee. This is a routine that women, unfortunately, being dropped from vehicles, not being clothed properly, and putting their clothes on in front of the elementary school kids and all of that. So while I see that on one side, that in our own neighborhoods, we have hungry children in 2024 America, I'm seeing that babies are being killed by our taxpayer dollars, and we are destroying nation after nation after nation. So I believe that I am the best candidate. There are 3 candidates in this. Originally, it was just my candidacy from Democratic side, and I was actually introduced in the Friend County Democratic Party meeting in September as the candidate. I talked to Liz Walters, the chair of Ohio Democratic Party, Michael Sextons, and everybody, and they were all aboard with it. Nobody was running against me. And then October 7th happened, Gaza happened. And around, I believe, Farrell and Connie and all of us, we met, and we wanted to take a group to, I was requested from Muslim community leader from Dayton and the Springfield area and Columbus area to have a meeting with Senator Brown's office to talk about what's going on in Gaza and how we can help and what leadership he should take. And he has a large number of Muslim constituents in the state. So we organized a meeting in November. I don't remember exactly the date what it was, after a long time waiting. And Farrell was part of that meeting also. And I had some other Palestinian young activists and some other donors to Senator Brown's. Senator Brown was not in this meeting. But I was told, and we were all told, that he will follow up with a call to me, and we will have another meeting with his staff and himself. Never heard back. There was nothing, no follow up. And 2 weeks later, I heard that Adam Miller is running against me. And Adam Miller is the state rep for the gerrymandered small portion of my bigger district in that Hilltop area. Never had competed against anybody, has not delivered anything. Like literally, if you guys look up the records, there is no impact of this particular rep. He does not live there. He has only rented an apartment and fake his residency to qualify for this. And I brought all of this. When I heard about it, I reached out to him and I said, I need to meet with you. So when we met, he told me straight to my face that a US senator has asked me to run against you. And I thought that he is just making it up. Originally, I really thought that. But then the endorsing process, the way it has, we requested not to be endorsed. Several other districts have not gotten any endorsement because all candidates are qualified candidates. But in my case, Bill DeMora was the campaign manager, who is also senator, and he also does many candidates' campaigns, was his manager. And they just literally forced the endorsing. And what I learned is that the screening committee was put together where nobody would know me. And I have been in part of the County Democratic Party for 16 years since President Obama was elected, and I played a major role in that also. So this whole screening process happened. I was told to send my questionnaire, my answers to my questions to the manager of my opponent campaign. So that didn't make any sense, and I raised voice about it. And then eventually, when the endorsement, the screening process happened, Adam Miller did not raise any money. He had only raised $16,000 against Mike Carey, who has $2.3 million. From last election, he raised, and I raised $200,000 by that time when we were screened. Still, Adam Miller got endorsed. And from that time onward, what I have seen that there is everything is being done, unfortunately, by the establishment of the Ohio Democratic Party and the Franklin County Democratic Party to somehow, to cancel for me to be elected. And I raised that point, and I voiced that out for, and I said this whole endorsement process was rigging, kind of rigging the primary. It shouldn't have been. This is not fair. Several other people talked about it. There are some other candidates also, like Judge Terry Jamison, who did not get a fair screening. Everybody asked not to endorse anybody. But in my particular case, Adam Miller was endorsed. His picture is being put on the sample ballot. He's being promoted on Democratic Party's money instead of because he didn't raise anything. And I am told that I cannot use discounted rate from Democratic Party. I cannot use the discounted rate for any of the mailers or yard signs or anything. So I have to spend more money because I'm not the endorsed candidate. And on top, what I'm seeing is that in Gaza situation, from Congresswoman Joyce Beatty to Senator Brown to the top establishment, these are the people who I have worked over the years. Like, we know each other, like we've been sitting and I've been supporting them. They don't want to look at my face now. And all the elected officials, the state officials, are being told that they are not supposed to support me. So, for example, State Rep Munira Abdullahi is a pro-Palestinian, very unapologetically, pro-ceasefire state rep right now. She's not supposed to endorse me. She's not supposed to be in pictures with me because they are all his colleagues. This is where we are, and I just wanted to share this.
Thank you.
This is how we are going.
That is a great short snippet of what it takes to run against establishment at this point. Ramsey, please, Pete, I think you're going to vacate and you wanted Ramsey to do a final comment, or go ahead, Pete, how you want to do, and then Ramsey, we'd like you to please, thanks again for your contribution to this historical conversation, and in particular your deep personal experience with this, more than experience. Yeah, as we have said, that that many of us will never experience what people are experiencing in this situation right now.
Yeah, just no words for it.
Go ahead, Pete, and then Ramsey, and then we'll get back to more conversation on local, what we need to do. If Ramsey needs to jump off, or if he could stay along, that'd be great. Thank you again for your words. And
yeah, and that's up to you, James, whether you want to stay on, but I just thought we'd give you a chance to just kind of summarize anything else you want to say, and then give you the opportunity to sign off if you want.
Me. I want to leave with a note of hope. And I don't know, even the word hope, it's becoming a little bit difficult to even to grasp under these circumstances. I think it's going to take us a long time to understand what has happened or what is happening and how we are going to process all of this and how all of this is going to factor into our personal lives. I mean, this happened. This happened. The Holocaust happened. This happened. Genocides happened. Terrible things in the world happened, and this has happened, and it happened on our watch. At times, it happened with, in this case, it happened with our own money. We financed this as it happened. And it's just for me, even as an American myself, it's just I pay taxes, and the taxes are buying the kind of white phosphorus that has burned my family alive. So I think it's going to take a long time for us to understand all of this. But on the other hand, I want to say that for the first time that I can remember, but I really do think, based on my understanding of history and the relationship between media and the way that our ideas and perceptions of Palestine is concerned, is that we have never been in a situation in which we are actually winning against mainstream media propaganda. I mean, this is also happening. And this is happening because of numerous individuals, organizations, nonprofits, activists, social media influencers, all working together. No prior plans, no prior organizations, no formal groupings, nothing. It just happened on its own. That the majority of Americans want a ceasefire, the majority of the human race wants a ceasefire. The global South is galvanizing once more, rediscovering its old energies of anti-colonial movements. You talk about liberation, Mark. I mean, this is true liberation movements happening all over the world. New people, new ideas. It feels like it's the 60s and 70s and that fervor of national liberations all over again. And we need to build on that. We need to be part of it. We don't want the blood of all these innocent people in the Middle East to go in vain, but at the same time, we want to build on it in order for us to build a true global movement, locally first, nationally and internationally. But we all need to be part of this movement and to bring this coveted liberation finally to all of us. So I thank you so much for everything that you're doing and for giving me the opportunity to convey some ideas and for your patience in listening to me. I appreciate it.
No, as a media complex or construct, we have tried to create since 1970 here in Columbus, Ohio. We always welcome journalists, and hopefully we'll continue to receive good written word from you. And if you've provoked anyone to bring the contrary, please bring that as well. We're not frightened of hearing anything that people may say. But thank you, Ramzi, for your long commitment to this struggle. A lot of folks go back to 48. You can go back to 1918 if you really want. You could go back, a millenniums of millenniums if you talk about Judah and Israel and the invasions of the Persians and then the Babylonians, and then you come up from the whole historical reference of how we want to capture this conflict is what it is. But October 7th did present to the global world a new reflection of what militarism does mean. And it means total obliteration of neighborhoods. I mean, we have not even, the problem with a lot of our local media, national media, is that they don't let us see war anymore. I mean, they learned from Vietnam not to show it on Channel 6 at 6 o'clock. They don't do that anymore. So again, Ramzi, thanks again for your global experience. Please get back to Gaza if you can, and share some more. But keep writing and tell us more about what your perspective is, and hopefully the world will become a better place. Imagine.
Thank you, Mark,
Right.
and thanks everyone. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Peace. So thanks. Let's continue this conversation. I don't know that there's always issues that provoke people, right? Provoke discussion. Pharrell has been involved with this struggle. Bill, you wanted to ask questions. Winnie, I know, wants to always invite into the communication. How do we want to proceed from this? Anyone that wants to jump off soon may want to get on their word first. We may go in. We're going to go into our free flow. So I don't know, Stephen, are we still recording at this point? I don't know. But if we, yeah, I think that'd be better. Okay, so now we can go free flow a little bit.